Melee infantry are the backbone of any army. Whether they're damage-dealing meat grinders or staunch line-holding bulwarks, they are the bedrock upon which you build your army and playstyle. But of these units, which are the best? Let's list them and find out. But if you want to know the best way to get these videos ad-free, it's by becoming a channel member. Just $1 a month for all the same videos with none of the ads. Now, onto the list. In 10th place, we have Blade Singers. This is probably a bit more of a personal choice, but I just had to get these guys on the list. Whilst I don't think they're the best at any one job that infantry can do, I still love them because they are damn good at almost everything. Almost. With their shadow coils and whirling death abilities, they can have high attack or swap it out for outrageous defense, armor piercing, or drop it in favor of more base damage. They can be excellent melee line holders, devastating armor-piercing damage dealers, or chaff shredders capable of taking on hordes of weaker foes. They may not be the best unit for any of these jobs, but the fact that a single unit with a couple of abilities can do all this is something to behold. Now, the glaring elephant in the room needs no explaining if you look at their stat card for more than a second. 15 armor is pretty piss poor, and 20% physical resistance doesn't do much to help it. If they get shot at, they'll evaporate. If they face too much resistance in melee, they'll evaporate. Basically, if they get focused with any kind of damage, they can go down extremely fast. Still, as long as you're melee focused and have some form of aid, they can be exceptional at best and pretty cool at worst. In 9th place, we have Great Weapons Black Orcs. I'm not gonna lie, when I first looked at Great Weapons Black Orcs for this video, I was a little shocked at just how low their stats were. Attack and defense are okay, but 50 weapon strength and only 36 armor piercing, and here I thought these were the pinnacle of the greenskin infantry damage. But then I remembered. Unstoppable Choppers gives them a 50% boost to both base and armor piercing, taking that to 54 armor piercing damage, all at the meager cost of 24 melee defense. Now sure, they may now be getting hit with basically everything that comes their way, but by God, they'll be slinging out so much damage that it really doesn't matter. They become a literal meat grinder that consumes anything that gets too close in moments. Damage-wise, I'd say with this ability, they're probably one of the best, if not the best damage infantry you can find. However, they're not any higher on the list because it comes at such a hefty cost to their defense. Even with their exceedingly high armor, they will still crumble under the pressure eventually, especially if their opponents have any armor piercing. Plus, a lack of shields means shooting them is also pretty straightforward. Still, if you're playing as greenskins and want to turn enemy front lines into a fine red mist, you can't go wrong with these guys. In 8th place, we have Sisters of Slaughter. These have been a mainstay on these kinds of lists since they came out, so I don't really feel like I have to explain why they're here. However, since this is a video about explaining what makes these units great, I'm going to do it anyway. Sisters of Slaughter may not look like much from their stat card. It's nothing crazy good or bad, but they lack armor piercing and armor, so at a glance you may think they hold no value. However, their real power comes from just a handful of places that you might even glance over on your first look. First and foremost, their defense. 58 melee defense is outrageously high for a starting point, and it will only get better the more you level them up. Melee defense, to keep things simple, is essentially the unit's chance to ignore each attack that comes their way in melee, meaning from recruitment, they'll be able to ignore over half of the melee damage coming their way. The second part that's important is leadership. 82 leadership is absurdly high and means they will stick around for a very long time. They'll have to be all but wiped out for these guys to even think about retreating. And finally, they also have poison damage, and this, in my opinion, is the best effect that any weapon can have. All it does is make whatever they hit much worse at dealing damage and running away. So they're extremely tanky in melee, never retreat, and make whatever they're facing worthless in combat. The only downside is ranged units can take them apart like nothing, but as long as you avoid that, they're golden. In 7th place, we have the Shielded Saurus Spears. I know it's probably a little bit boring having a bunch of defensive units on this list, but honestly that's what infantry are like 90% of the time. Shielded Saurus Spears are probably some of the best bang for your buck defensive infantry in the game. I was pondering with or without shields because you can get them earlier, but I went with shields in the end because they make for the most well-rounded unit. Plus, they're still plenty cheap and their stat card is pretty ridiculous once I put it in some context. So defense first, and it may not seem like much, but it matches Temple Guard, so it's just about as good as it gets in the faction. Their armor is also damn high for when you unlock them, meaning not much at that stage of the game will really be able to hurt them. plus a bronze shield to keep them safe from missiles, and they are very hard to put away. On top of all of this, they also have some halfway decent damage. Granted, their attack isn't the best, but still, for a unit available so early, this is some damn good damage, especially if they're against something big. These are certainly not the best units in the roster, or even honestly the best melee unit, but for when you unlock them and how much they cost, they are extremely strong. In 6th, we have the Chosen of Siege. Sometimes on these lists, I feature a unit that are excellent value for being so cheap. These are not one of those units, but they are just so good at what they do that it doesn't really matter that they're expensive as hell. Where Sisters of Slaughter were sneakily good at keeping themselves alive, Chosen of Siege require no sneaking. They are insanely tanky, and it's perfectly plain to see why. Crazy high armor, defense, and a silver shield mean any damage that comes their way, either by missile or melee, will need to be pretty serious to even break through to their HP bar. Plus, that HP bar is extremely large with over 10,000 health in the tank. And as a little cherry on top, they also have a 1000 siege barrier, which of course will regen whenever they're not in combat. Now, as far as damage output is concerned, they're nothing special. Unless they're against something with very low armor, they won't really do a whole lot, but that isn't the point. In the roster, they are there to be a wall to keep enemies in place, whilst your missiles, mages, and monsters tear everything else to shreds. They can hold back just about anything and give those units the time and space they need to work and win you the day. Like I said, it's simple to explain why these guys are so good. They just never die. In 5th place, we have the Silvering Guard. Yet another defensive unit. Whoa, this list sure is heating up. But in all seriousness, Silvering Guard are probably the best defensive units in the roster, and you unlock them super early, and they really don't cost that much. All of this adds up to make them one of these sleeper hits of the high elf roster because at a glance, you really wouldn't expect them to be so valuable. They have all the hits, very high defense for something so cheap, extremely high armor, and a silver shield, so any damage thrown their way will have to get through a lot of defenses to make it to their health bar. They have spears, so you know they keep that more freaking expert charge reflection on them. Martial prowess only gives them more defense and attack, and as far as damage is concerned, okay, yeah, damage is kind of ass, but you can't have everything. They are the most staunch line of spears you could ask for and will keep enemies in place for a very, very long time, giving your Sisters of Avalon, Dragon Princes, Merworms, or whatever else you'd like plenty of time to deal all the damage. Now sure, you could upgrade to Phoenix Guard for more armor and damage, but as far as value for money is concerned, Silvering Guard are hard to beat for the Acer. In 4th place, we have Halberdiers. Finally, something with some actual damage. Halberds are possibly the winner of the bang for buck infantry because they are dirt cheap, unlock super early, and are the best line holders in the Empire, and I don't think it's particularly close. Granted, that's because their late game infantry options are a little lacking, but still, they rock, especially for how cheap they are. So first off, 42 defense is plenty for holding back basically anything. Yes, their armor is only 30, so against ranged or high damage they may struggle, but at the very least in melee, they will hold their own a lot longer than you'd think. Plus, with 70 leadership, they're relatively reliable, so it's not like they'll turn tail and run at the first sign of danger. And of course, charge reflect versus large is pretty tight, so they're great versus anything as big as trolls to absorb that impact and use it against their attackers. As far as damage is concerned, yes, 26 attack is not the highest, but their armor piercing damage is actually pretty great, especially against large with their decent chunk of bonus damage. They'll get some decent licks in, and even if that's not their main job, at least in my eyes, it's nice to know they won't be sat idle the entire time. As long as you can protect them from a ranged focus, I really do think that these are the best pound for pound, or in this case gold for gold, line holder in Warhammer 3. You simply cannot get better value for money anywhere. Unless of course you become a member for just $1 a month and get ad-free versions of all videos. Wow, nothing's touching that, brother. In 3rd place, we have Wrathmongers. I think skipping Khorne on a list of the best melee infantry might be against some kind of law, but I simply had to get Wrathmongers on here somewhere. They may be a little bit of a gimmick unit, but by God, they commit to the bit so hard that I have no choice but to respect them. To sum them up, Wrathmongers are essentially shirtless men empowered by Khorne with an insatiable bloodlust and the ability to wield hammer flails like no one else. Their stat card is truly insane, so let's break it down. Damage is the focus, and with 60 attack, they will have no problem hitting extremely often no matter what they're up against. And when they do hit, it will be devastating, with extremely high armor piercing damage that can cut through the toughest defenses, no problem. They even have a nice chunk of charge bonus, so that initial impact will be just as devastating as the follow-up. Oh, and they also have Frenzy, so whilst confident, they'll gain bonuses to all of this, and their leadership is super high, so chances are they'll basically never break. Defense-wise, they're still really respectable. High armor and defense means they can stand up to most things that come their way. No shields, of course, means you'll want to look out for range damage, but if you can manage that, these will do all the work in melee. The one major downside is the small unit size, which means they're quite easy to overwhelm and surround, but if you can make adjustments around this, there really is no downside. Pretty much the highest damage output you can get in the front lines, and all you're working with is a bunch of lads with no tops. In second place we have Ironbreakers. I don't think it'll come as a surprise to anyone to see these guys on a list like this. They've been one of the best frontlines units in the game since launch, and nothing will ever really change that. They're pretty much the pinnacle of tanky, immovable front lines, and do so without the need for any fancy abilities or regenerating shields. They have a disgusting amount of melee defense that only gets better as they level up. Their armor is nigh unbreakable, so a third of all melee attacks that make it through will barely touch their HP. They also have a silver shield, so can block most missiles that come their way, and even have expert charge defense, so nothing can knock them back in any meaningful way. And lastly, leadership, which is essentially unbreakable. They will eventually break, but at that point the battle is likely lost anyway, so it hardly matters. Damage-wise, there's still nothing all that special in melee, especially if they're up against armor, however ranged is a different story. Their explosive charges may be limited in range and ammo, but they're enough to soften up anything headed towards them by a pretty considerable margin. The other real strength of Ironbreakers, and really the entire dwarf roster, is their height. Chances are whatever they're fighting will be taller, so ranged units will have no problem firing over their heads for easy, safe damage. Ironbreakers would likely still be one of the best if they were a little taller, but in this case at least, smaller is better. However, they're not quite the best. That honor goes to Infernal Ironsworn, and they really are just cooler Ironbreakers. They have everything they do, but drop just 2 defense to gain more attack, damage, and range on those missiles. Add on magical and fire damage, and they have to take the top spot by pretty much default. And honestly, that really is all I have to say on them, because they literally are just better Ironbreakers. The defense is still massive, along with the same armor and shield, so they are just as impossible to kill. Their damage is better, but still not the main draw, so more of a nice bonus to soften up enemies than a real way to beat an army. And they're still short enough that units can easily fire over their heads for easy, safe damage. Add on the fact that the Chaos Dwarf roster also has monsters and cavalry, and they're even more valuable, as all of these need someone to hold enemies still whilst they get to work. It's a bit of an underwhelming end to the list, but I really believe that they are the best. If you're looking for an unbreakable line holder with some explosive power, then look no further. But what I want to know is, what's your favourite melee infantry unit in the game? Maybe you're like me and you think that Blade Singers are pretty nifty with all their abilities, or maybe it's someone not on the list at all. Let me know either way in the comments below. Like, subscribe, and if you want more Warhammer 3 list videos, then check out this one all about the best battling lords in the game.